A reading from Luke chapter 16, verses 1 to 13. Then Jesus said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, 'What is this that I hear about you? Give me an account of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer.' Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes.' So, summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil. He said to him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, 'Take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust you to the true riches? And if you've not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth."
Tomorrow sees the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, who died just over a week ago. Each of us will be experiencing and reflecting on her death and the accession of Charles III differently, no doubt. But for many it has been an intense and emotional week, and it seems more than appropriate to keep these historic events in focus today. At first sight, the parable of the unjust steward who is apparently commended for his dishonesty is not the most promising reading for reflecting on this moment of such great significance. But as I've tried to make sense of this difficult passage, I've come to see it as resonating with a key feature of the life and faith of our late Queen, namely her commitment to service of God and others in the role that she accepted as her vocation. What makes the passage so difficult is that the Master seems to commend the unjust actions of his manager, and we wonder what Jesus meant to communicate by means of this story. The difficulty we have in trying to answer that question is that we don't have the exact words of Jesus or the context in which he spoke them. What we have is Luke's account of it, shaped by its telling and retelling in the early Christian community. And it seems that the parable probably caused the early Christians to scratch their heads a bit too, because after the parable itself we get a series of sayings that seem to be added on to the end to try and explain it. This culminates in verse 13 with Jesus saying that no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and wealth. That seems to be where the parable is heading in Luke's account. That's the climax. And the pivotal verse in getting there from the parable itself to that conclusion seems to be verse 9. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. In this verse we transition from thinking about earthly wealth to that which is of eternal value, that which lasts forever. And it's that leads on to the point about not serving God and wealth. But again, it's the reference to making use of dishonest wealth that is particularly difficult here. Surely we should strive to be honest in all our dealings. Surely we should steer clear of dishonest wealth altogether. But perhaps the point here is that all earthly wealth is dishonest to a degree. Not dishonest in terms of being earned by dishonest means, but in the sense of being somehow problematic, particularly in a world of so much poverty. Many of us cannot avoid being entangled in it to some extent. We don't have to have great wealth to be wealthy in the global sense. And so the teaching here is that we should use such wealth as we may have for the purposes of the kingdom, for the good of others. And this is what brings me back to the late Queen. She was undoubtedly entangled in great wealth. And there are those that would question the wealth of the monarchy in a world with so much poverty. But she used the wealth and influence that came with her position for good. She used it in support of the charities that she was patron of and in service to the nation. And she did so in a way that pointed to deeper and more abiding values, that pointed to the eternal dwelling to which she will be commended in the funeral service tomorrow. And for all of that, I give thanks. The new king too is entangled with great wealth, and negotiating these entanglements is not easy. It requires cunning and careful stewardship. And so it is very important that, as 1 Timothy 2 verse 1 instructs us, we should pray for him, as we are to pray for all kings and all who are in high positions. We might think of the position of monarch as one of great privilege, but it's a privilege I certainly wouldn't want. So let us pray for King Charles, that he too may serve God and use the wealth and influence of his position for the good of all and in the light of eternity.